He didn't just steal my money, he stole the future I bled for. He figured $75,000 was the price of his freedom and my destruction. He thought he won. He left me with a breached contract, crushing debt, and a ruined life. But he forgot one thing. I didn't just know his ex-wife's name. I knew she was just as hungry for payback as I was. My name is Eliza, and I am, or perhaps I was, a person who believed in tangible results. At 38, I am the marketing director for Innovate Solutions, a company that doesn't reward effort, only victory. I live by data, by projections, by the concrete outcomes of 80-hour work weeks and sacrificed weekends. My career is a monument built on precision. This morning, Friday, I logged into our joint bank account with that same sense of concrete certainty. The coffee in my mug was still hot. The apartment was quiet, serene. The browser window opened. The little blue circle spun for a moment, and I waited for the validation, the digital confirmation of my success. The number was supposed to be massive. My performance bonus, $75,000, had cleared the clearinghouse 2 days ago, added to our existing savings, the money we had painstakingly put aside. We should have been looking at the foundation of our new life. The screen flickered and settled. The balance read $112.14. I stared at the numbers. 112, 14. My brain refused to process it. It was a glitch, a server error. I clicked the refresh button at the top of the browser. The cursor clicked. The screen flashed. $112.14. I hit refresh again. And again. The number stared back at me, mocking. Absolute. It wasn't a glitch. A cold, metallic taste filled my mouth. The air in our apartment, already heavy with the smell of cardboard boxes and packing tape, suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my throat. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter, my thumb fumbling over the screen, pulling up Mark's name. My husband, 40 years old, the man who handled the numbers, the man who told me to stop worrying. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked. "You've reached Mark. Leave a message." His voice, cheerful and familiar, was a grotesque insult. I hung up without leaving a message. I threw the phone onto the sofa and scrambled down the hallway to his home office. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Empty. The word doesn't do it justice. It wasn't just tidy. It was sterile. His high-end laptop, the sleek docking station, the tower of external hard drives where he meticulously labeled his backups, all gone. The only things left were the indentations in the carpet where his chair used to be and the power strip on the wall, its little orange light glowing uselessly. My hands were shaking. I yanked open the top desk drawer, the one where he kept his essentials. No checkbooks, no bank fobs, and no passport. The small, dark blue booklet that always sat in the back corner was gone. My eyes scanned the bare surface of the desk, desperate for an answer, for anything. I found one, stuck to the center of the wood veneer. A single bright yellow sticky note. His familiar, hurried script. 5 words. "I'm sorry. I had to." That was it. No explanation. No love. Just an abdication. I had to. The cowardice of it made me want to vomit. I stumbled back to the living room, grabbing my phone. I dialed the bank's customer service line. My voice, when I finally spoke, was a strained whisper. "My name is Eliza Miller. All the money in my joint account. It's gone." The woman on the other end was professional, detached. "Ma'am, please calm down. Let me verify your identity." I spat out my mother's maiden name and the last 4 digits of my Social Security number. There was silence on the line as she typed. "Mrs. Miller," she said, her tone suddenly cautious. "I do see a significant transaction, a wire transfer. It was initiated yesterday afternoon." "Where?" I choked out. "A large international transfer to an account in Belize. It was finalized approximately 12 hours ago." "That wasn't me," I almost screamed. You have to stop it. You have to reverse it. It's theft. Her voice went flat, programmatic. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but the request was verified through all security protocols. As your husband, Mark Miller, is a joint owner on the account. The withdrawal is perfectly legal. There is nothing the bank can do. Legal. He had the right. I disconnected the call, the word legal echoing in the silence. My phone immediately vibrated in my hand, buzzing violently against my palm. The caller ID flashed Sarah, Realty, the agent for our dream home. I stared at it, unable to move. It rang again. I finally pressed the green icon. Eliza. Sarah's voice wasn't the warm, congratulatory tone I was used to. It was sharp, cold. Eliza. The earnest money check bounced. I closed my eyes. The check. The check Mark had assured me he'd delivered, funded by my bonus. What? I whispered. It bounced, she repeated, her patience gone. Insufficient funds. The sellers are furious. Eliza, they think you're playing games. They're threatening to sue. You are officially in breach of contract. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Sarah's voice was still squawking from the speaker, a tinny, distant sound. I didn't hear her. My gaze drifted over the living room. It was a graveyard of our future. Brown cardboard boxes stacked shoulder high, labeled in Mark's handwriting, kitchen, living room, master bedroom, boxes filled with things for a house we would never own, boxes for a life that had just been executed. The floor rushed up to meet me. I collapsed onto my knees, my hands landing on a box marked fragile. A sharp, guttural sound ripped from my chest, a noise of such profound betrayal it didn't even sound human. I was surrounded by the architecture of a lie, suffocating in the ruins of a future that had been stolen 12 hours ago. The memory of it all felt like a different life, lived by someone else. Sitting on the cold floor, surrounded by the debris of my trust, my mind fled the sterile emptiness of the office and the damning yellow note. It fled back 6 months, to the day it all began, the day my promotion was announced. It was not just a promotion, it was an ascension. Director of Marketing, the corner office, and the bonus, the $75,000 bonus. It was not just money, it was a trophy. It was the physical manifestation of 2 years of 80-hour work weeks, of dinners eaten over my keyboard, of client calls taken on holidays. I had ground myself down to a fine powder to earn it, and Mark had been my biggest cheerleader. Or so I thought. He had kissed me when I told him, lifting me off the ground in our small apartment kitchen. You did it. Liza, he had shouted. You're a rock star. Now we can finally get our house. The house. It was always our house. He was the one who found it. I was too buried in the final push for the Innovate launch to even look at listings. He spent weeks scouring the Hudson Valley, sending me links I barely glanced at. Then, he found the one. It was an old Victorian, about an hour and a half outside the city. It was dilapidated, with peeling paint and a porch that sagged, but it sat on a hill overlooking a small creek. It has bones, Eliza, he had said, his eyes bright with an enthusiasm I mistook for shared excitement. Real, solid bones. We can fix it up. It will be our forever place. He handled everything, the inspections, the offer, the endless back and forth with the sellers. I was grateful. The launch was consuming me, and he seemed to thrive on the details. You're the creative brain, babe, he would say, rubbing my shoulders as I hunched over my laptop at 10 at night. I'm the numbers guy. Let me take this burden. You just focus on winning. And I did. I won. And I let him take the burden. I trusted him. That was the real crime. Was it not? I trusted him absolutely. I gave him access to my successes, to my future, and he just saw it as a bank account to be drained. The first crack. So small I missed it, came when we discussed financing. Mark sat at our kitchen table, laptop open, brows furrowed in concentration. "It's this damned market, Liza," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's insane, and my credit. It is still taking a beating." He had told me all about it. The vicious ex-wife, the unfair divorce settlement, the old debts from his previous marriage that he was still heroically paying off. It was a narrative he had crafted so perfectly. I never questioned it. He was the victim, the good guy fighting an uphill battle. "The sellers are skittish," he continued, closing the laptop. "They want to see that we're liquid. They're worried we won't get the mortgage approved because of my history." I nodded, tired, my mind already on a marketing deck for the next morning. "Okay, so what do we do?" He leaned forward, taking my hands. His were warm. "The bonus, the $75,000. The moment it hits your account, we need to transfer it straight into the joint savings. All of it. It will show them we have more than enough cash on hand to cover the down payment and closing. Even if the bank stalls, it proves we're serious. It's the only way to make them feel secure." It made perfect logical sense. A simple, strategic move. Show liquidity. Secure the house. "Okay," I said. "Whatever it takes. Mark, let's do it." I saw the relief flood his face. It was not just relief. I see it now. It was triumph. He had his key. He just had to wait for me to unlock the door. The night before he vanished. Wednesday night. The transfer was done. The bonus was in the joint account. A beautiful, fat number sitting there, waiting to be deployed. We had just finished packing the last of the kitchenware. Mark pulled a bottle of champagne from the fridge, one we had been saving. "What's this for?" I asked, exhausted but happy. "To us," he said, handing me a glass. "And to the house on the hill. Our house." We clinked glasses. The champagne was cold and sharp. I remember he drank his quickly, then poured another. He seemed wired. His knee was bouncing under the table. His smile was a little too tight at the corners. "You okay?" I had asked. "You seem stressed?" He forced a laugh. "Stressed. Of course I'm stressed. We're buying a house. Liza, it's the biggest thing we've ever done. I just want it to be perfect. I just want us to be perfect." He kissed me then, a deep, almost desperate kiss that I mistook for passion. I see it now for what it was, the kiss of Judas, the final intimate act of betrayal before the heist. That memory, once so sweet, now curdled in my stomach. Every word, every touch, every shared smile over paint swatches and mortgage rates. It was all a performance, a long, meticulous, 6-month con. He was not stressed about the purchase. He was stressed about the getaway. He did not just find a house. He found his exit strategy, and he built it using my money, my trust, and my 80-hour work weeks. The house on the hill was not our future. It was the stage he had built to execute my life. For the first 24 hours, I was a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. I drifted between the phone and the window, existing in a state of suspended shock. The apartment, filled with its silent, accusatory boxes, was a prison. But on the second day, the shock fractured, and the ice-cold sliver of rage began to take root. I was not just heartbroken. I was hunted. I was being sued. I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the police. I sat in a hard plastic chair at the local precinct, the smell of burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant stinging my nose. I explained my story to a desk sergeant who looked at me with a profound, practiced indifference. He clicked his pen. He wired $75,000 to Belize. I finished, my voice sounding thin. The officer sighed, a small puff of boredom. "Okay. And this man, your husband. Did he have legal access to this joint account?" "Yes, but—" He held up a hand, stopping me. "But nothing, ma'am. If his name was on the account, he had a legal right to withdraw the funds." "What you have here," he said, leaning back in his squeaking chair, "is a civil dispute. It's not a criminal matter. He stole my bonus. He stole our savings. He ran off to another country. He withdrew money from his own account." The officer corrected me, his voice flat. "It happens every day. You need to hire a divorce attorney. We can't do anything." A civil dispute, as if we were arguing over who got to keep the toaster. I walked out of the precinct, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me, sealing me off from the one institution I thought was supposed to help. I was alone. Worse than alone. When I got back to the apartment, there was a new voicemail. It was not from Mark. It was from the seller's attorney. His voice was sharp, devoid of any empathy. He formally stated that I was in breach of contract, that my check for the earnest money had been returned for insufficient funds, and that his clients were retaining my deposit and intended to sue for further damages and specific performance. I was trapped. I had $112. I was being sued for a house I could not buy. And the man who had done this to me was protected by the very laws I had respected. That was when the grief finally burned away, leaving something hard and cold in its place. The marketing director, the data analyst, the woman who built strategies, she was still here, and she was furious. If the system would not help me, I would burn the system down. I went back to his empty office. I stood in the center of the room, breathing in the stillness, the void where he had been. He had taken his computer, his drives. He had been meticulous, but Mark, for all his planning, was arrogant. He believed I was just the creative brain, that I never paid attention to his numbers guy world. He was wrong. I remembered an old cloud service we had briefly subscribed to years ago, before we consolidated everything under one family plan. He had complained about the interface and supposedly canceled it. But Mark never just canceled things, he abandoned them. I sat at my own laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I found the login page. I entered an old email address of his, one he had not used since before we were married. Password. I tried our anniversary. Access denied. I tried his mother's birthday. Access denied. I tried the name of his childhood dog, the one he always told stories about. It was a digital graveyard. Old files, disorganized folders, photos from 6, 7 years ago. He had not touched it in ages. He had forgotten it existed. I started to dig, sifting through the digital debris of his former life. Most of it was junk. Old resumes, fantasy football spreadsheets. Then I saw it. Tucked inside a folder labeled MISC, there was another folder. A folder he had titled, with sickening cinematic flair, Plan B. My heart did not pound. It went perfectly still. I clicked. It was not full of financial documents. It was an email archive, a neatly exported backup of a single account. And the correspondence was all with one person, Rachel Vaughn. The name hit me with physical force. Rachel, his ex-wife, the evil one, the one he had painted as a financial vampire, the woman who had allegedly destroyed his credit and bled him dry in the divorce. The reason he was so damaged when he met me. He had spent years poisoning me against this woman I had never even seen. My hands were shaking. I opened the first email file. I was expecting to see legal threats, bitter arguments, transcripts of fights over assets. The email that opened was from Rachel, dated 8 months ago. "My darling M," it began. "Just be patient. She's close to the promotion. I checked her company's stock projections. It's going to be big. Just hold on a little longer. I miss you. My darling M." I clicked another. And another. There were hundreds of them, stretching back not just months, but years. Before he had even met me. They were not hostile. They were intimate. They were affectionate. They were the collaborative, mundane, loving emails of a couple who were very much still together. They discussed me. "The workaholic is pulling another all-nighter," Mark had written 6 months ago. "She's so focused on this launch. She wouldn't notice if I sold the sofa. God, I'm tired of pretending to be impressed." She's the perfect mark. M. Rachel had replied. She trusts you. She thinks you're the victim. Let her win. Let her get that bonus for us. I felt the bile rise in my throat. My entire marriage, our entire relationship, was a long con. I was not his wife. I was the mark. I scrolled through the archive, my mind cold and sharp, absorbing every lie. And then I found the one that sealed it. From Rachel, sent 3 weeks ago. Mark, it's almost over. As soon as she gets the bonus and transfers it, we're free. I've booked the flights. I cannot wait to be on that beach with you and finally be done with this. I frantically searched the rest of the Plan B folder. There, a PDF file named Travel Docs. I opened it. 2 one-way tickets. Premium cabin, departing from JFK. Destination Belize City. Departure date Thursday. 12 hours ago. Passenger 1, Mark Miller. Passenger 2, Rachel Vaughn. He did not just leave me. He left me for the woman he never actually left. He had used me, my career, my $75,000 to fund their reunion. The woman he claimed had ruined him was, in fact, his partner in ruining me. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat at my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark, silent apartment, and I read. I descended into the digital archive of my own ruin, click by click, file by file. The plane tickets were just the epilogue. The Plan B folder was the entire script, and the protagonist was a woman I had never met. My rage had cooled. It was no longer the hot, chaotic panic of the day before. It had settled into something heavy and cold, a dense, dark star collapsing in my chest. I was no longer a wife. I was an auditor, and I was meticulously reconstructing the timeline of the fraud that had been my marriage. It began years ago, the divorce, the one Mark had described to me with such manufactured pain, the one that had left him financially ruined and emotionally scarred. It was a lie. All of it. I found the emails between him and Rachel. Their divorce was not a separation. It was a strategic decoupling, as Rachel had phrased it. Mark had been involved in a failed business venture, a tech startup that went belly up, leaving him exposed to creditors. The divorce was a firewall. It was a calculated legal maneuver to transfer all their primary assets into her name, shielding them from the lawsuits. He was left with the debt and the bad credit, creating the perfect persona, the talented, handsome victim, wronged by the world and his vicious ex-wife. And what does a sympathetic victim need? A rescuer. I found the email, the one that marked my execution, 3 years before it happened. It was from Mark to Rachel, sent the night of an industry networking event where I had given the keynote speech on emerging market strategies. I found her, he wrote, the Innovate Solutions speaker, Eliza. She's brilliant, driven, and completely buried in her work, ambitious, but naive. She's the perfect mark. I'm going to introduce myself. I remembered that night. I remembered a charming man accidentally spilling a drink on my blazer, his profuse apologies, his disarming smile. Our meet cute was not fate. It was an acquisition. My marriage was a long con, a patient, multi-year setup designed solely to wait for the moment my career peaked. They were not just surviving, they were waiting for their early retirement, as they called it in their emails. They were waiting for my $75,000 bonus. But the house, I still could not understand the house. Why the complexity? Why the breach of contract? Why involve a third-party seller who was now threatening to sue me? It felt too risky, too convoluted. I searched the archive again, this time for Hudson Valley. A new folder appeared, Hudson Project. It was not filled with contracts or inspection reports. It was filled with web design assets, JPEGs of Victorian-era homes, font libraries, a file named templatev2.html. I did not understand. Then I saw the email from Mark to Rachel, dated 2 months ago. Okay, the site is live. Hudson Valley Heritage Realty. Huh, Took me all weekend, but it looks legitimate, right? Even added some fake testimonials and a Meet Our Team page. Henderson is all set to play the seller. My blood went cold. My fingers, shaking, moved to a new browser tab. I typed in the name of the real estate company, the one Sarah supposedly worked for. The website loaded. It was beautiful, professional. And there, on the front page, was our house. The peeling paint, the sagging porch, the hill overlooking the creek. Our dream house. I opened another tab. I went to the public county assessor's records for the Hudson Valley. I typed in the address of the property. The record loaded. The property existed, but it was not for sale. It was owned by a family trust based in Ohio and had been for the last 50 years. It was not listed on Zillow, not on Redfin, not on any legitimate multiple listing service. It only existed on Mark's fake website. He did not find the house. He invented it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The entire setup. The difficult seller who would only accept a massive earnest money deposit. The pressure to prove liquidity. The frantic calls Mark pretended to have. It was all a performance. And Mr. Henderson, the furious seller, the one whose attorney was now threatening to destroy me, I searched his name in the email archive. He was not a seller. He was Rachel's cousin. He was in on it. The entire thing, the excitement, the stress, the packing, the champagne was a meticulously constructed play. It was a pressure cooker, a brilliant, airtight psychological trap designed for one purpose: to create an urgent, legitimate-sounding reason for me to transfer my entire bonus into the joint account, a place where he could legally access it and vanish. A strange, bitter taste filled my mouth. I was not in breach of contract, because there was no contract, there was no house, there was no seller, but it did not matter. The lawsuit was just smoke, a distraction to keep me panicked and looking in the wrong direction while they made their escape. The money was gone, and I finally understood the true horror of his plan. He knew I would go to the police. He knew they would ask if he had legal access. He knew they would call it a civil dispute. He had designed the perfect crime, one that looked like a simple domestic dispute on the surface but was a deeply calculated criminal fraud underneath. He had left me in a room full of boxes, holding a pile of digital evidence that proved my own humiliation, but gave me no power. He and Rachel were on a beach in Belize, toasting their success. And I was left with $112 and the knowledge that my entire life had been a lie. The tears stopped on the third day. They didn't taper off, they simply ceased, as if a faucet had been decisively turned off. The crushing weight of the grief, the humiliation, the sheer cavernous emptiness, it all remained. But it was no longer a disabling fog. It had cooled, compressed, and solidified into something else. Something cold, something sharp, something I recognized from the toughest negotiations of my career focus. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist with a problem to solve. I accepted the primary truth: the $75,000 was gone. Belize was a financial black hole, a jurisdiction designed to make money disappear. Chasing it, as he intended, would be a fool's errand, wasting what little resources I had left on international lawyers who would promise the world and deliver nothing. He wanted me to be frantic. He wanted me to be broken. I would be neither. He had been meticulous, but he was also arrogant. He believed I was the creative brain, the naive workaholic who never looked past a marketing deck. He had made a mistake. I knew he had. People like Mark, people who build their lives on layers of deception, they always keep one asset firewalled, one escape hatch just for themselves. I went back to the Plan B archive. I was not just looking for evidence of his crime anymore. That was established. I was looking for his leverage, his real future, the one he had not even shared with Rachel. I dug deeper, past the emails and the fake travel documents. I started opening corrupted files, old zip folders, the digital detritus he had not bothered to clean up. And there, in a folder mislabeled Old Tax, I found it. Not an email, but a PDF of a legal document, articles of organization. The company name was Vaughn Holdings, LLC. Vaughn, Rachel's maiden name. I stared at it, my mind racing. He had mentioned it, only once, years ago, over wine. He had dismissed it as another one of Rachel's failed projects from before their divorce, a defunct company he had been roped into. He had waved his hand, the picture of weary frustration. Another lie. I assumed it was dead, but a good strategist never assumes. I left the cloud archive and went to the Secretary of State's public database. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. I typed in the entity name VAUGHNHOLDINGS. I hit enter. The screen buffered. A record appeared. Status active. In good standing. My heart, which I thought had frozen, gave a single hard kick against my ribs. It was not defunct. It was alive. I paid the $15 fee with my personal credit card to pull the full public record. The documents loaded. I scrolled past the formation date 7 years ago. I scrolled past the registered agent, and then I stopped. Under principal assets, there was a single entry, not a bank account, but a property deed, an address, a unit number, a zip code. I knew the building. Of course I knew the building. It was the impossibly chic, glass and steel tower downtown. It was the penthouse, the one he had been renting for the past 2 years, the one he claimed, with a casual laugh, that he got a steal on because it was owned by some Belgian investment fund that didn't know the market. He wasn't renting it. He owned it. He had been living in a multi-million-dollar asset right under my nose, letting me split the utilities, while telling me his credit was too wrecked to buy a house. He had hidden his most valuable possession in plain sight, insulated from his creditors, from Rachel, and from me, inside a legal fortress bearing her name. This was his mistake. This was the one thing he could not liquidate and wire to Belize. This was my leverage. The next morning, I was not in a police precinct. I was in the office of a high-rise, seated across from a woman named Anne Hayes, one of the most ruthless commercial litigators in the city. I did not cry. I did not plead. I laid out the printouts on her mahogany desk like a battle plan, the fake realty website, the email chains, the 2 plane tickets to Belize, and, last, the Vaughn Holdings LLC documents next to the penthouse deed. She reviewed everything in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up, her eyes landing on the LLC paperwork. "This is the problem, Ms. Miller," she said, her voice crisp. "This is a corporate asset. His name is not on the deed. The LLC is... You can't put a lien on this apartment based on his personal fraud. We would have to pierce the corporate veil, and I assure you, the bar for that is nearly impossible to meet. We cannot prove your $75,000 went into this specific asset." I had anticipated this. "So I can't touch it," I stated. It was not a question. "We can sue him personally," she offered. "But he's in Belize. We'd get a default judgment, but it's just paper. It's worthless. I'm sorry." "The police called it a civil dispute," I said, my voice as cold as her own. "You call it piercing the corporate veil. They're the same thing. They're the legal walls he built to hide behind." "Exactly," she said, starting to gather the papers. I placed my hand on the pile, stopping her. "He built the walls, but he didn't build them alone." I slid the formation document back to the center of the desk and tapped the second name listed under managing members. "Rachel Vaughn," I said. Hayes looked at me, confused. "His co-conspirator. She's on a beach with him. She's not going to help you sue an LLC she's part of." "No, she won't," I agreed. "Not to help me. But you're assuming Mark is only defrauding me. People like him don't have partners. They have victims and future victims. He used this LLC to hide assets from his creditors years ago, using Rachel as the front." I leaned forward. "He just stole $75,000 from me. He's sitting in Belize with her right now, making her feel like his partner. But that penthouse, That's his parachute, not theirs. I am willing to bet my last $112 that she has no idea it even exists. He probably told her he lost it in the bankruptcy, just like he told her he was a victim. I looked the lawyer dead in the eye. So, what if we can't prove the LLC is an instrument of fraud against me? Hayes's eyes narrowed, finally catching up. What if, I continued, we can convince one of the owners that the other owner is committing fraud against the company A, breach of fiduciary duty, an internal dispute? What would that trigger? A slow, calculating smile spread across the lawyer's face. That, she said, would trigger a full court-ordered audit of all assets. It would freeze the asset from being sold. It would force him to appear. He's safe from me, I said, standing up. He's insulated by the law. He's insulated by geography. He thinks he's untouchable. I picked up my bag. He forgot about the one person who has the power to burn his entire fortress to the ground. He's just not her enemy yet. I need an insider. I need Rachel. Finding them was easy. The travel docs folder in the Plan B archive held more than just the flight tickets. It held a full itinerary, a confirmation printout for a 2-week stay at an exclusive, secluded resort in Ambergris Cay, a place with private villas and a strict no-media policy, a place for people who did not want to be found. Mark and Rachel had been there for 3 days. They were comfortable. They were celebrating. They were, I imagined, laughing at me. I did not contact the resort directly. I used a third-party, anonymous messaging service, one of those slightly shady online businesses that, for $25, will fax a priority message to any hotel in the world, routed through 3 different countries. It was completely untraceable. I crafted the message with the precision of a surgeon. I did not address it to Mark. I addressed it to Rachel Vaughn. The message was 7 words. Rachel, he's playing you too. Check the Zurich account. There was no Zurich account. Not one that I knew of, anyway. It was a phantom. It was a perfectly tailored piece of psychological warfare. Zurich was a cliché, a word synonymous with secret, numbered bank accounts. It was just plausible enough to be terrifying. I was not planting evidence. I was planting a seed of pure paranoia. I was betting that a man who had just executed a multi-year con on his wife was already acting suspicious, and that his partner was already on edge. I hit send. The $25 left my credit card. For 3 days, there was nothing. The silence from Belize was absolute. I spent the time dismantling the rest of my apartment, moving the boxes from the living room to the spare bedroom, transforming my home from a monument to a lie into a war room. I called the seller's attorney the fake seller's attorney and told him I was retaining counsel. The bluster in his voice evaporated instantly. On the 4th morning, an email appeared in my inbox. It was not my work email, but an old personal one I had used in my initial communication with my lawyer, one Mark did not know about. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters from a secure, encrypted provider. The subject line was blank. The body contained 3 words. Who are you? It was her. Rachel. The bait was taken. I did not reply with threats. I did not reply with emotion. I replied with cold, hard leverage. I'm the wife he just stole $75,000 from. The one whose bonus is paying for your vacation. And I know he's hiding the penthouse from you. Shoo! 30 minutes later, my computer chimed with an incoming video call request from the same encrypted service. My hands were perfectly steady as I clicked accept. Her face filled my screen. The background was aggressively tropical, a white sand beach, painfully blue water, a piña colada sitting on a table. She was tanned, her hair bleached by the sun, but the vacation glow was a thin veneer. Her eyes were red-rimmed and darting, and she held a cigarette in a hand that was visibly shaking. She was in paradise, and she looked like a prisoner. He told me you gave him the money, she hissed, the words tight. He said you were generous, that you wanted to help him clear his old debts before the house closing. He lied, I said. My voice was calm, my own face impassive. I was in my dark apartment, surrounded by boxes. The contrast was stark. He faked the entire house sale. Rachel, the realty website, the seller, the contract. It was all a stage production to get my $75,000 bonus, and he used you to help him do it. You're the liar, she shot back, but there was no conviction in it, just fear. You're just a bitter, jealous wife. I am bitter, I agreed, but I am not jealous, and I am not lying, and I am not the one you should be worried about. You're the one in Belize with a man who just proved he will do anything to get money. Did you really think you were the exception, or are you just the next phase of the plan? She flinched. The cigarette shook in her hand. What do you want? She whispered. I want to talk about Vaughn Holdings. LLC, I said. I want to talk about the downtown penthouse, the one he told me he was renting, and the one I'm sure he told you he lost in the bankruptcy. The color drained from her tanned face. She dropped the cigarette. What? What are you talking about? What penthouse? I had her. He had hidden it from her. He's been holding on to it for 7 years. Rachel, I said, leaning into my camera. A multi-million-dollar asset, hidden in plain sight. He's letting you play partner, but that apartment, that's his escape hatch, not yours. He's planning to sell it, empty the accounts, and leave you in Belize with nothing but a sunburn, just like he left me with nothing but a stack of boxes. She started to hyperventilate, a low, panicked sound. No, he wouldn't. He promised. He promised me too, I said. He's been different since we got here, she admitted, the words tumbling out. Controlling, secretive. He keeps his phone locked, even when he's in the shower. He took my passport. He said it was for safekeeping in the hotel vault. He's been checking his accounts constantly, but he won't let me see the screen. She looked directly at me, her eyes wild with the dawning, horrific realization. She had been his partner in the con, and now she was just his liability. That apartment, she said, her voice cracking. That apartment. It was mine. It was my family's. It was my inheritance from my father. He tricked me into putting it into the LLC years ago. He said it was to protect it from his creditors, from the bankruptcy. He swore he would sign it back over to me as soon as the divorce was finalized and the debts were cleared. He promised me he'd give it back. I went silent. This was not just fraud. This was not just my $75,000. He had stolen her entire legacy. He had used his creditors to steal from her, then used me to pay off the debts against the very asset he had stolen. I looked at this woman, this stranger I was supposed to hate, this evil ex-wife, and I saw myself. We were 2 different women from 2 different lives, staring at each other through a computer screen, bound together by the same predator. He's not just a liar, Rachel, I said, my voice hardening. He's a thief. And he's not going to get away with it. What are we going to do? She asked, the we hanging in the air between us. You're in Belize, I said. You're trapped. I'm in New York, and I'm being sued. We have no power. I paused, letting her feel the weight of it. But Vaughn Holdings, LLC does. You are a managing member of that company. Rachel, you have power you don't even know you have. Her eyes, red and terrified, locked on mine. He thinks he's untouchable, I said. It's time for his partner to schedule a performance review. It's time for you to demand an audit. We, she had said. The word was a lifeline, and I grabbed it. Here is the plan, I said, my voice cold, precise. I was a marketing director again, outlining a campaign. I am an outside creditor, a victim of fraud. It's messy, it's slow, and he's insulated by geography. But you, Rachel, you are an owner. You are an insider with a fiduciary stake in Vaughn Holdings. You have rights he cannot ignore. She was listening, her breathing still shaky, but her eyes were locked on mine. You are going to hire a lawyer, I continued. You are going to petition the court for an emergency audit and an injunction, effective immediately. You will claim your partner, Mark Miller, is mismanaging and embezzling corporate assets. You will claim he is a flight risk, which he is, and that he is actively trying to liquidate the company's sole asset. Rachel shook her head, the old panic returning. A lawyer, Eliza. I'm here. He has my passport. I can't even get to the airport. I don't have any money. He doesn't have your phone, and he doesn't have your voice. I countered. And you don't need money. I do. I have 3 credit cards with a combined limit I have never touched. I will pay the retainer. My lawyer, Ann Hayes, will find you a shark, someone who specializes in shareholder disputes. All you have to do is make the call from that resort and tell him the truth. Your partner has stolen your inheritance, and you want it back. The video call ended. We were no longer 2 wives. We were a conspiracy. An hour later, Anne had a name, Thomas Croft, a litigator with a reputation for being a stone-cold killer in corporate governance disputes. I wired $10,000 from my credit card, a cash advance that made my stomach heave, to his firm's trust account. The war had officially been funded from a laptop in the resort's business center, while Mark was out for a run. Rachel Vaughn made the call. She sent the email. She signed the retention agreement digitally. She told Croft her story, the real one, the one about her inheritance. The petition was filed in New York Supreme Court by 9 a.m. the next morning. The shockwave must have hit Mark instantly. He would not have received a call from me, or from Rachel. He would have received an official, terrifying email from a New York court notifying him, as managing member of Vaughn Holdings, of a petition filed by his partner, Rachel Vaughn. He was blindsided. This was not in his meticulous plan. Rachel was the accomplice, the lover, the partner who was supposed to be grateful. She was not supposed to have agency. She was not supposed to have a lawyer. He must have stormed back to their villa, demanding answers. But Rachel, following my instructions, was gone. She had used the resort's shuttle to go shopping in town, taking only her phone. She was suddenly, mysteriously, unreachable. Mark was trapped. He was in Belize, a country with no jurisdiction over a New York LLC. But the petition was in New York. If he ignored it, he would receive a default judgment. The court would grant Rachel's petition. The audit would proceed without him. The judge would freeze the penthouse, and a forensic accountant paid by me would start dissecting every transaction he had ever made. The penthouse, his multi-million-dollar parachute, would be lost. He could not let that happen. He could not risk Rachel winning. He had to fly back. He had to get to her lawyer. He had to intimidate her, manipulate her, convince her that I was the villain, that I had poisoned her. He had to regain control. While he was frantically booking a one-way ticket back to the United States, I was in Ann Hayes' office, signing my own set of documents. "He's coming," I said. It was not a guess. "He'll be on a plane within 48 hours. "It's ready," Ann said, tapping a thick stack of papers. My own civil complaint. Fraud, deceptive business practices, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We attached the evidence screenshots of the fake realty website, the certified email chains from the Plan B archive, the bank statements showing the $75,000 transfer. We were not just asking for my money back. We were asking for punitive damages. We were asking for the penthouse. "We wait," Ann said, her voice calm. "We track his flight. The second his plane's wheels touch the tarmac at JFK, he is in our jurisdiction. We file, and we serve." We got the flight confirmation from Rachel. She'd found it in his email. He was arriving at 6:10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I did not go to the airport. I sat in my apartment, in the dark, surrounded by boxes. But my process server was there. A man named Costello, a retired detective Anne kept on retainer for exactly these kinds of moments. Costello described the scene to me later. Mark Miller walked through the international arrivals gate at JFK with an impatient, arrogant stride. He was tanned, wearing a linen shirt, and looked annoyed, like a man whose vacation had been rudely interrupted. He was, no doubt, confident that he could quash this little rebellion from Rachel in an afternoon. He was a master manipulator, and she was just a woman he had fooled for years. He was scrolling through his phone, probably calling Rachel again, when Costello stepped directly into his path. Mark Miller. Mark barely looked up. "Yeah, what?" "You've been served," Costello said, thrusting the first thick legal packet into his hand. "Civil complaint. Eliza Miller versus Mark Miller." Mark froze. He looked at the name on the documents. My name. He saw the words, "complaint fraud." His face, tan and relaxed moments before, turned a sickly gray. He looked up, bewildered, searching the crowd, perhaps for me. But before he could even form a thought, a second man, this one hired by Rachel's lawyer, stepped up to his other side. Mark Miller. Mark flinched. "You've been served," the second man said, handing him another, equally thick packet. Petition for emergency audit and preliminary injunction. Rachel Vaughn versus Vaughn Holdings. He stood there, trapped between two strangers, holding two lawsuits, one from the wife he had abandoned in New York, one from the partner he thought he had left safely in Belize. He was surrounded. As he stood there, paralyzed in the terminal, his phone buzzed, an email alert from his bank, then another. The moment Ann Hayes received Costello's confirmation of service, she had electronically filed the ex parte injunction. A judge, seeing the overwhelming compiled evidence of the wire fraud, the fake website, and the immediate flight risk, signed it instantly. His domestic accounts were frozen. The penthouse, his one true asset, was frozen. A lien slapped on it before he had even cleared customs. He was back in America. He was trapped in the city he tried to flee, holding two lawsuits, with no access to a single dollar of his stolen money. He was, for the first time in his life, completely and utterly cornered. The war was fought in sterile 10-hour blocks, in conference rooms smelling of stale coffee and industrial carpet. Mark was cornered, and his initial arrogance, which I saw glimpses of in his lawyer's belligerent emails, had curdled into desperation. He was being attacked on two fronts: my civil suit for fraud, which he could perhaps dismiss as a marital dispute, and Rachel's petition for an audit, which was an internal corporate attack he could not ignore. He was bleeding money he could not access. His lawyer, a sharp-suited man whose entire personality seemed to be a sneer, called Ann. They wanted to settle. I sat in Ann's office, the speakerphone sitting like a black toad on the desk between us. "Ms. Hayes," the lawyer's voice crackled. "My client is a reasonable man. This has all been a terrible emotional misunderstanding. He's distraught over the pain he's caused Ms. Miller. To make this right, and to avoid dragging both parties through a painful public process, he is prepared to offer $20,000, a gesture of goodwill to close this chapter. $20,000. He was offering to pay me pennies on the dollar with my own money. It was not a settlement, it was an insult. It was what he thought my humiliation was worth. Ann muted the phone. "Eliza," I shook my head. "Once. Ask him," I said. "If that's the down payment." Ann unmuted the call. "Mr. Friedman, we appreciate the gesture, but my client finds your offer lacking." "Lacking," he scoffed. "This is a generous offer, given the dubious nature of your claims. What does she want?" 50,000? I leaned forward, my voice low and clear, aimed directly at the speaker. "I don't want the money, Mr. Friedman. I want the apartment." A sharp, sudden silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing. "That," he finally said, his voice tight, "is preposterous." "It's non-negotiable. That asset is wholly unrelated to your client's domestic claims. It's held in an LLC. She has no standing." "Then we will see you at the preliminary hearing," Ann said, and disconnected the call. The hearing was 2 weeks later. The courtroom was cold, the air heavy. I saw him for the first time since he had vanished. He was sitting at the defendant's table, his expensive suit hanging loosely on him. His vacation tan had faded to a sickly, grayish yellow. He looked thin, consumed from the inside out by his own venom. He would not, could not, Look at me. His lawyer stood, all polished confidence, and laid out the exact argument we expected. Your Honor, he said to the judge, a formidable woman with tired, intelligent eyes. This is a tragic but simple case of marital overreach. Ms. Miller, the plaintiff, is understandably upset that her husband, my client, has left her. However, she is attempting to leverage her personal grievance to attach a lien to a corporate asset, Vaughn Holdings, LLC, an asset that has nothing to do with her. She is not a member. She is not a shareholder. She has zero legal standing. Her claim is with Mr. Miller personally, not with this company. We ask that you dissolve the injunction and release the asset immediately so this legitimate business can continue its operations. It was a clean, solid, legal argument. The judge nodded, looking over her glasses at Anne. Ms. Hayes, he seems to have a point. Why are we freezing an LLC for a personal dispute? Anne stood, calm and collected. Your Honor, she said, we do not dispute the fundamental law. Ms. Miller has no claim on the assets of a legitimate company. Mark's lawyer sat back, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. Our entire case, however, Anne continued, is that Vaughn Holdings is not a legitimate company. It is a sham corporation, a legal fiction, a shell created for the specific and sole purpose of perpetrating fraud, and we have a witness who can attest to that. The other managing member of the LLC. We call Rachel Vaughn to the stand. The heavy wooden door at the back of the courtroom opened. If Mark had looked sick before, he now looked like he had been shot. His head snapped around, his mouth falling open. He thought she was in Belize, neutralized, a problem he could manage later. He did not know she was in New York. He did not know she was here. Rachel walked down the aisle, her face pale but resolute. She did not look at Mark. She took the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she was sworn in. Her lawyer, Thomas Croft, handled the questioning. Ms. Vaughn, you are a co-founder of Vaughn Holdings, correct? Yes, she whispered, her voice amplified by the microphone. And what was the purpose of this company? Mark's lawyer was on his feet. Objection relevance. This hearing is about the injunction, not the company's history. It is entirely relevant, Your Honor, Croft countered. We are here to prove this company is an instrument of fraud. Who better to ask than its co-founder, overruled, the judge said, waving a hand. Sit down, counsel. I want to hear this. Proceed. Ms. Vaughn. Rachel took a shaky breath. It was supposed to be a holding company for an apartment that was my inheritance. Mark. Mr. Miller. He convinced me to sign it over, to put it into the LLC. He said it was to protect it from his creditors after a bad business deal. So, you were under the impression he was protecting your asset? Yes, she said, her voice cracking. But then he forced me to sign papers I did not understand. He told me the asset was lost to his debts. He lied. He stole my inheritance. Objection, Mark's lawyer shouted. This is hearsay. It's quiet, the judge snapped. And is that all he used the LLC for? Croft continued. To hide your asset. Rachel looked at the judge, her eyes filling with tears. No, he also used it to launder the money he stole from Eliza Miller. The air was sucked from the room. Mark's lawyer just stood there, his mouth open. Mark himself had gone rigid, his face white as bone. Explain that to the court, Ms. Vaughn, Croft said gently. When we were in Belize, she said, I suspected he was lying. He was secretive with his computer. I waited until he was asleep, and I copied the files from his laptop. I found his bank statements. I gave them to my lawyer. Croft produced a thick sheaf of papers, handing them to the judge. Your Honor, he said, these are the bank records. They show the complete, unadulterated path of Ms. Miller's stolen funds. He walked toward the judge's bench. You will see the $75,000 wire transfer from the joint account. It did not, as Mr. Miller claimed, go to Belize. It was routed through 3 separate shell accounts, one in Delaware, one in the Caymans, before being deposited into the primary operating account of Vaughn Holdings. And then, 2 days later, a payment for exactly $75,000 was made from the Vaughn Holdings account directly to the mortgage lender for the penthouse. He turned to face Mark. "He made a fatal mistake, Your Honor. He got arrogant. He didn't just steal Ms. Miller's money. He used her stolen bonus to pay down the debt on the very asset he had stolen from Ms. Vaughn. He used one fraud to finance the other, and he washed it all through his legitimate company." Mark's lawyer was sputtering, but no words came out. The judge stared at the bank statements, her face growing darker with every page. She looked at Mark with pure, unadulterated disgust. "So let me get this straight," the judge said, her voice dripping with ice. "This man," she pointed at Mark, "convinced his first wife to sign her inheritance into an LLC. Then he married a second woman, stole her $75,000 bonus, and used it to pay the mortgage on the first wife's stolen apartment." "That is correct, Your Honor," Anne said, standing. "The entire LLC is fruit of the poisonous tree. It is the beginning, the middle, and the end of his fraudulent enterprise." The judge closed the file. She had seen enough. "Injunction upheld," she boomed, banging her gavel. "All assets of Vaughn Holdings remain frozen, but this court is going further." She glared at Mark. "Based on the evidence presented, which shows a direct and irrefutable financial link between the plaintiff's stolen funds and the asset in question, this court declares the penthouse property at 41 Park Avenue to be a direct fruit of the fraud. I am ordering the immediate court-supervised sale of this property at public auction. The proceeds will be held in escrow, first to make Ms. Miller whole for her $75,000, plus damages and legal fees. Whatever is left, if anything, can be fought over by Mr. Miller and Ms. Vaughn in their own separate lawsuit." Mark let out a strangled, involuntary noise. "You used your wife's hard-earned bonus to pay your mortgage." The judge spat. "This is not a civil dispute. This is a theft, and you are not going to profit from it. Auction is to be scheduled within 30 days. We are done here." The auction was held on a gray Tuesday, in a sterile, beige-carpeted room at the county courthouse. It was not a glamorous affair. There were no champagne flutes, just a grim-faced auctioneer and a handful of professional bottom-feeders, property flippers in cheap suits, vulture investors, and real estate lawyers looking for a quick score. And then there was Mark. He was sitting in the front row, a place he always preferred, as if proximity to the stage gave him control. But he had no control. He was a ghost, haunting his own execution. His expensive suit, the charcoal gray one he used to wear for important client meetings, was wrinkled and hung on him like a shroud. His skin had that waxy, translucent quality of someone running on pure, toxic adrenaline. He was vibrating, a taut wire of fury and disbelief. He was not there to watch. He was there to buy. He still thought he could win. I had anticipated this. With his domestic accounts frozen, he was crippled. But his offshore accounts, the ones in Belize funded by my $75,000 and whatever else he had siphoned, were still his. He could not bid himself. That would be an admission, a direct link. So he had a proxy. It was almost comical in its transparency. A nervous-looking man in a rumpled shirt sat 2 seats away from Mark, holding a numbered paddle. He kept glancing at Mark, waiting for cues. Mark, in turn, was trying to be subtle. A slight nod here, a flick of his hand there. He was a master manipulator trying to conduct a symphony with a broken baton. I stood at the very back of the room, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed. I wore a simple black dress. I was not there to participate. I was there to bear witness. Mark saw me when he first walked in. His eyes, bloodshot and hollow, met mine. There was no remorse, no sadness, just a flash of pure, black hatred. I held his gaze, my expression perfectly, calmly blank, until he looked away first. The auctioneer, a man with a rapid, monotone voice, began. "Lot 1. The property at 41 Park Avenue, Unit 3003, a penthouse apartment. Court-ordered sale. We will open the bidding at $500,000. 500! A voice from the back called out. A flipper, testing the waters. 550, Mark's proxy said, his voice cracking, his paddle shooting up after a frantic gesture from Mark. 600, said another bidder, a woman in the second row. 650. The proxy shot back instantly. Mark was trying to muscle them out, to show he had deep pockets. 700, the woman replied, not even blinking. The bidding climbed, fast and brutal. 750, 800, 850. It was a blur of numbers, the auctioneer's chant filling the room. At 900,000, the flipper and the first bidder dropped out, shaking their heads. It was now just Mark's proxy against the calm woman in the second row. 950,000, the proxy called out. Mark was white-knuckling the armrest of his chair. 1 million, the woman said, her voice clear. A gasp went through the room. Mark's proxy looked at Mark, his eyes wide with panic. Mark, who had been leaning forward, now sat rigid. He was visibly doing the math. This was not the fire sale he had counted on. He had expected to buy his own apartment back for a fraction of its value, using my money, leaving me with nothing but the scraps. 1 million, the auctioneer repeated. Do I hear 1.1? Mark's proxy was sweating. He looked at Mark. Mark gave a short, violent nod. 1,050,000, the proxy stammered. 1,100,000. The woman in the second row said, bored. This was it. Mark was furious. He was now pulling out his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen. He was calling someone his offshore bank. Probably checking his balance, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He was losing control. The proxy looked terrified, caught between the auctioneer's relentless call and the silent fury of his boss. 1,100,000, the auctioneer intoned. Going once, going twice. Mark held up a finger, a desperate, pleading gesture. He was still on the phone. Sir, I can't wait for your calls, the auctioneer said, annoyed. Do I have a bid or not? Mark hung up, his face ashen. He had hit his limit. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The proxy slumped in his chair, putting his paddle down. 1,100,000. The auctioneer called. Any other bids? No then. Sold for $1,100,000. To the lady in the third row, paddle number 42. A stunned silence. The woman in the second row, the one who had been bidding, looked confused. She lowered her paddle. Mark's head snapped around, his eyes scanning. The lady in the third row, I followed his gaze. In the third row, a woman who had been sitting perfectly still, her back to us, slowly stood up. She had not raised a paddle. She had not said a word. She had been using a proxy of her own, the woman in the second row, to do the bidding. She turned around, her eyes calm, her face composed. She looked directly at Mark, her gaze sweeping over him, a mixture of pity and contempt. It was Rachel. She held up her own paddle. Number 42. She looked at Mark, and then, for the first time, she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile of pure, devastating victory. Mark made a noise, a strangled, guttural sound. It was the sound of a man who had not just lost his apartment, but who had just watched his last escape hatch slam shut, lock, and catch fire. Everyone in the room was staring. The auctioneer, the flippers, the lawyers. They were watching the end of the play, and Rachel Vaughn, the vicious ex-wife, the ruined partner, just stood there, the rightful owner, having used his own tactics against him, waiting to sign the papers. He didn't just walk out of the courthouse. He fled, shoving past a group of lawyers, his suit jacket flapping open, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He burst through the glass doors onto the plaza, gulping the cold city air like a drowning man. He was looking for someone to blame. someone to attack. He saw Rachel, who was standing near the steps, waiting for her lawyer. Mark lunged, not like a husband, but like an animal, grabbing her by the upper arm. His voice, stripped of all its charm, was a raw, guttural rasp. The money. Where did you get $1 million? How you're broke. I left you with nothing. Rachel looked at the hand gripping her arm, her expression not one of fear, but of profound disgust. He, in his panic, did not even register her contempt. He only knew that his last, most valuable asset had been bought by the woman he thought he controlled. She didn't have to answer. She just looked past him, over his shoulder, her eyes finding mine as I walked calmly out of the courthouse doors. My heels clicked on the pavement, a steady, measured rhythm. Each step was a drumbeat, signaling the end. Mark heard the clicks. He released Rachel, spinning around, his wild, bloodshot eyes locked onto me. The gears were turning, his frantic, narcissistic brain trying to process this new variable. He saw me. He saw Rachel. He saw the two pillars of his life, the two women he had systematically stripped of their assets and their trust, standing 10 feet apart on a cold, gray plaza. You, he hissed, his voice trembling. He took a step toward me. This was you. You gave her the money. Oh, she has money, I said. My voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it cut through the noise of the street. Or she had something better. She had my money. He just stared, his face a grotesque mask of confusion. His lawyer, Friedman, came rushing out, pale and sweating. Mark, get in the car. We're filing an appeal. We will contest the distribution of the proceeds. Don't say another word. You still don't get it. Do you? I said, looking not at the lawyer, but directly at Mark. I took a few steps closer. I wanted him to see my eyes. You're still doing the math, aren't you, Mark? I asked. You're frantic, but you're still calculating. The apartment sold for $1.1 million. The judge, she only awarded me $75,000, plus damages. You're thinking, okay. I lost the apartment, but I get the proceeds. I'm still walking away with almost $1 million. Right. You think this was just a bad day. His expression told me I was exactly right. He thought he had lost the property, but saved the cash. That was the judge's order, Mark, I said, to make me whole. But the law is very specific, and once the asset was ordered to be sold, it was no longer just your asset. It was a pool of money owed to your creditors. And as it turns out, there were two of us. Two very motivated creditors. Rachel had walked over, her own lawyer, Croft, beside her. She stood next to me. We were a united front. We had a meeting. Mark, I continued. Me, Rachel, Anne, and Mr. Croft. We drew up a joint settlement agreement. The judge just had to sign off on it to certify that all creditors' claims were satisfied. And they were. You see, I laid it out for him, piece by agonizing piece. I had a claim for $75,000, plus damages. I was a victim of your fraud. But Rachel, she was the original victim. She had a claim for the entire apartment, her inheritance, which you stole from her 7 years ago. The court recognized both our claims, but her claim, the original, documented theft of the property itself, was always superior. He was shaking his head, not in denial, but in a desperate, dawning horror. So I made a choice, I said. I didn't want the money. I wanted this. I waived my right to a $75,000 cash payout. Instead, I legally assigned my entire claim, my status as a fraud victim, directly to Rachel. My stolen bonus was the key, Mark. It was the irrefutable final piece of evidence that proved the entire LLC was a sham from start to finish. It gave Rachel the power to not just sue you, but to reclaim her property. I smiled. In exchange for my key, she unlocked the door. The court agreed to settle both of our claims in one move by transferring the deed, the title of the penthouse, directly to Rachel Vaughn, its original and rightful owner. The auction was just a legal formality to establish the public value. It was never about who had the most money. It was about who had the most right. The blood drained from his face. He finally understood. His proxy, his offshore accounts, his frantic phone calls. None of it ever mattered. He was bidding on a property that was never for sale. He was not outbid. He was nullified. "You don't get a single dollar, Mark," I said softly. "The asset is gone. The proceeds are zero. You get nothing." Rachel, who had been silent, stepped forward. She was holding a single, new key. "Thank you for returning my home, Mark," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And thank you for the $75,000 fee, Eliza. I'll consider it a finder's fee for recovering my property." She didn't wait for a response. She and Croft turned and walked away. Two quiet victors. Mark just stood there, a hollow shell on a public street. He was no longer a player. He was not a husband, not a partner, not a property owner. He was just a man in a wrinkled suit with frozen bank accounts. I looked at him one last time. "You know, the police were right," I said, pulling my coat tighter. "It was a civil dispute, but the Internal Revenue Service. They felt differently. They were fascinated by the Plan B archive, the fake realty website, the shell companies, the wire fraud to Belize. They call that tax evasion." I saw the last bit of fight just dissolve. He actually crumpled, sliding down the courthouse wall to sit on the filthy steps, his head in his hands. He was broke. He was trapped, and he was about to be hunted by the federal government. I didn't say another word. I turned, faced the street, and started walking. I left him there in the wreckage of the life he had stolen, and the life he had lost. Thank you for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.